This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Running a small business means I wear lots of hats. When I put on my hiring hat, I can count on LinkedIn Hiring Pro to make it easy. LinkedIn Hiring Pro helps manage my hiring workflow, puts my job post in front of a unique network of professionals, and matches me with the best candidates for my business. I can also share my job with my network. No other job site lets me do that. No wonder most small businesses say they'd use LinkedIn Hiring Pro again. Hire right the first time. Post your job for free on LinkedIn today at linkedin.com/quality.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'm joined here with exciting guests, David LaFontaine, who's in charge of the LGBTQ Classic Literature YouTube channel. So, hi, David.
Hello, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And then I'm here with longtime creative collaborator, Christian Garcia, host of That Old Gay Classic Cinema. Hi, Christian.
Hi, everyone.
So we're really excited to be here on YouTube live because we are live. If we make some mistakes, forgive us. But we would love for you all to ask questions. So I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. And if you have any questions you want to ask about these movie musicals or your thoughts on these movie musicals, queer themes in movie musicals or just your love of movie musicals, go for it. This is interactive. So we're going to go in order of the movie musicals. Each of us have chosen two. So David's up first. He's going to talk about Camelot first. And, I was excited, David, when you sent me an email that you got excited about John Glenn's new book, The Lost Book of Lancelot, this retelling. So, King Arthur and Camelot are alive and well. They have not been forgotten.
And I have just, thanks to you, I've just started reading that book, and it's a great book. It's really,
yeah. I love the Arthurian legend. So, Camelot, give us a little, history about this.
Well, the timing for me couldn't be better because just a couple of months ago, I suddenly, having missed this series when it was first on, I suddenly discovered the series Merlin. I don't know if people are familiar with it. And I just fell in love with it. And it's like for the last 2 months, every night I'm going through all 5 seasons. And it's a retelling of the Arthurian legend. And it's, homoeroticism from start to finish. But it's really like a classy production and with excellent acting. And so to come back to Camelot is really a treat because this is a movie that was released nearly 60 years ago. October 25th, 1967 was when it premiered. It was based on the successful stage musical starring Julie Andrews and Richard Burton. So it was a very long-awaited production directed by Joshua Logan. And the critics did not know what to make of it. It was in the wake of The Sound of Music, and Warner Brothers wanted it to be another family-friendly Hollywood musical like The Sound of Music and Mary Poppins. And Camelot was something utterly different. And the critics, some of them liked certain aspects of the film, but there was a lot of puzzlement because Camelot the film, is very much about sex. And so let me just briefly summarize this particular version of the King Arthur legend. It begins with Arthur as a young king meeting Guinevere and falling in love with her, and then they decide to marry, and he establishes the Round Table. And far off in France, a young knight named Lancelot du Lac hears about the Round Table, and he journeys to Camelot on fire with the vision of becoming Arthur's greatest knight. And the queen immediately dislikes Lancelot because he's so priggish. But the two of them fall in love. Arthur, within, it seems like immediately upon meeting Lancelot, is also smitten with him, gives him the nickname Lance, um, whispers in his ear in many scenes, touches him in very intimate ways. And so it's an extraordinary relationship among the three characters is set up. Time passes, and the affair between Lancelot and Guinevere is blazing, and everyone in the kingdom knows about it. And Arthur, of course, knows about it and refuses to take any action against either his wife or Lancelot. He refuses to banish them. And ultimately, we have the tragic story of the downfall of the kingdom. So the question then is, what is the role of sexuality in Camelot in this retelling? And why does it make this such a very beautiful and unique version of the King Arthur legend? So I wanted to share a couple of pictures from the film. Richard Harris, who actually is joining me in the background here, plays King Arthur. He's probably best known to younger audiences for playing Dumbledore in the first two Harry Potter films. But believe me, you should have seen him in his like glory days, and he very fetching, very, very sexy, very handsome Irishman from County Limerick. And unlike any other Arthur, he doesn't come across as a warrior. And you can see one of the things that some of the critics criticized the film for is they said, why is Richard Harris wearing all of this makeup? He's wearing eyeshadow and eyebrow liner. It's like, and Bosley Crowther of the New York Times said, oh, Harris's performance is campy. So this is all in 1960s talk. This was all a way of saying, oh, this is a gay man or a bisexual man. And so the critics were onto something, but they didn't know how to process it. And they also failed to do justice to the film because Arthur is portrayed as a bisexual king, but his bisexuality is portrayed as essential to his strength as a king. And in fact, bisexual love between men is one of the forces that brings the round table together. And so I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. And let me just show you some of the stills from the movie Camelot.
I've been in this library for 6 hours. I'm out of snacks and energy. Plus, I just realized I forgot to put deodorant on.
Oh, girl, you're a mess. Let's run to Target.
Let's RTT.
We'll grab some protein chips, body spray, and deodorant.
And we get 20% off with Target Circle so we can get those great face masks for our self-care Sundays.
I love an SCS.
Let's get out of here.
College students get 20% off their next purchase with Target Circle. Subject to terms. Visit target.com/circle for more details.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
Here's Richard Harris as King Arthur. And there's no question that Harris and the director Joshua Logan openly discussed the sexuality of the king and decided that they wanted to make Arthur into a very modern king, very sensitive, someone who dreams of peace, someone who sees the Round Table not as a force that conquers England, but a force that brings peace to Britain, and that his fluid sexuality is part of what makes him such a sensitive and extraordinary person. Here is the object of desire in many respects. Franco Nero, who was 24 years old when
Hello.
as Sir Lancelot. And there's a lot of heat on screen connected with Lancelot. And the director, Joshua Logan, he uses what I like to call the homoerotic gaze. And where the camera um, conveys a homoerotic perspective in the way that it photographs men's bodies. And so it's perfect in terms of showing the perspective, because we look at Lancelot from Guinevere's perspective. So it's very empowering from the perspective of women, but we also look at Lancelot from Arthur's perspective. And so that's where the homoeroticism comes in. And I like to think that Camelot, all these years before Heated Rivalry, the filmmakers were onto something. They realized that there's an audience for homoeroticism. There are not only gay and bisexual men out there who enjoy it, but there are plenty of women who think it's really cool to see very pretty men, with their shirts off, or, hugging each other or loving each other. Here is Lancelot being knighted by Arthur, and this is the sword Excalibur. Another major, I think, point of interest for the film Camelot, and something that just hadn't been done, certainly in American movies, is that the classic love triangle, in which usually two men are in love with the same woman, or in this case, the woman is also in love with two different men. Guinevere, played by Vanessa Redgrave, is in love with both of these men for different reasons. But Camelot morphs the classic love triangle into a ménage à trois, which is a very different scenario, because in a ménage à trois, wherever one is in the triangle, there's sexual attraction to the other person. And homosexuality is essential to a love ménage à trois in which two of the three principals are males. One of my favorite scenes is the joust. This is the scene in which Lancelot performs his miracle. Lancelot has built himself as a pure knight whose purity gives him miraculous powers, and also the best fighter, and he defeats these three knights. But when in defeating the third knight, the knight is mortally wounded and dies. And Lancelot can't accept the fact that this man has died and that he has killed him. So he dismounts from his horse, and he comes over and he begins massaging his chest, almost like CPR, heart massage. But then, even more extraordinary, he leans within not even like a quarter of an inch near the knight's lips. And it looks to all intents and purposes that he's going to kiss the knight on the lips. And then he starts whispering, "Live, live, live," breathing life into the knight. And the knight miraculously comes to life. So not only is this a pivotal moment in the story, because Guinevere is now smitten with Lancelot, Lancelot is now the darling of the court, but in terms of the themes in the movie, as with Arthur's sexuality, Lancelot nearly kissing the knight and using that very erotic physical connection with the knight to bring him back to life shows that love between men is a positive force in the kingdom. So just want to conclude with a few more photos. Here's how this got a G rating. I can't imagine. It must be because Warner Brothers was so powerful, but it's not a G rated kind of a film. It has a lot of sexy scenes. There are scenes in which there's partial nudity on screen. There are scenes in which the actors were actually naked when they filmed the scenes. And the love between Lancelot and Guinevere is beautifully rendered, and life imitated art, because Redgrave and Nero fell in love during filming, and they began this passionate love affair, which was in all the newspapers when she became pregnant. And she announced that he was the father, and she was so happy, and she had no intention of marrying him. So it became like this international scandal. And I remember when I was very, very young reading about this, and to me, it was like the coolest thing in the world that, these sophisticated Hollywood people were having a baby and they weren't going to be married. But in terms of on screen and off, Guinevere and Lancelot's forbidden love is very appealing to LGBTQ people because their love breaks all the rules, but their love is beautiful, and it's through songs such as "If Ever I Would Leave You." It's celebrated in Camelot, and the evil in Camelot is not the lovers, it's not the ménage à trois, it's the narrow-minded people who can't understand how precious and unique the king, the queen, and Lancelot are. So it's the narrow-minded forces that surround Arthur and the lovers that brings about the downfall of Camelot. So I encourage people to watch this film again. It really is extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, and Vanessa Redgrave, I think, David, um, it's so fascinating that she's Guinevere because this is like 1967 is, I want to say before she's in the film. Yes, 1971. She's in this film called The Devils. Do you know that film?
Yes.
Okay.
Dude.
It like I think it's being re-released in the movie theaters in the fall, but like she's like this very lustful nun who um accuses a priest of witchcraft. And it's like this really wild
Absolutely.
film. But I feel like Vanessa Redgrave is just so captivating. I
She is
mean,
not. She also played Isadora Duncan just a year later. And
mm,
so she's the quintessential liberated woman. And again, for it's a whole new take on Guinevere. But what I would argue is that if we go back to earlier versions of Arthurian legend, Tennyson and Thomas Malory, that the homoeroticism is very present there too.
mhm.
And that's why I'm excited about this new book that you recommended, The
Yeah,
Lost Book of Sir Lancelot. There's so much more to this classic literature and so much more to classic films, than if we just open up our minds, and we have to look a little bit beneath the surface. But in the case
yeah,
of Camelot, the imagery and the actors, their performances are so splendid and so nuanced that they convey sexuality through their
yeah.
body language, through their facial expressions.
Yeah. Well, and I know a text you really love, David, is West Side Story. For
Yeah.
those watching, you have to look up the West Side Story documentary David did on his
Mm.
channel. Um, and Romeo and Juliet, the late 60s film, also had a G rating until it got reissued in the 70s, and then it got a PG rating, even though there's nudity in that too. I feel like they were more liberal. It seems like they were more forgiving with nudity in the 60s and
Well,
70s.
and it was nice because it allowed young teenagers to see these movies.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
today, even a little bit of nudity and something is slapped with an R rating, and you can only see it with your parents, and that's not that much fun. Whereas people could go see Romeo and Juliet or Camelot with their friends because those films had PG or even G ratings.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing here with this menage a trois homoerotic interpretation. Like you said, it's in the uh King Arthurian legend itself. Yeah. Thomas Mallory's fast. Love what Thomas Mallory does in La Morte d'Arthur. Um, but yeah, so now I know you're gonna bring us into Cabaret.
Yes.
So yes.
And
So
if Camelot pushes the envelope and defied expectations for a film musical, Cabaret um, redefined the whole genre. It
mhm,
was you know there was nothing like it, and really I don't think it's been equaled in so many respects. It was released in 1972, directed by Bob Fosse, based on the successful stage play, which won many Tony Awards and ran for over 1,000 performances. But I think the stage play in no way compares to the film musical. Now, I want to just give a very brief summary. about Cabaret. Cabaret is based on the Berlin Stories by Christopher Isherwood, who is a prominent gay author, a prominent 20th century gay author. But unfortunately, when his stories were turned in first a stage play called I Am a Camera, and then into the stage musical Cabaret, Isherwood's homosexuality was totally expunged. If you read I Am a Camera, and if you look at the film version, it's as if Isherwood has no sexuality whatsoever, as if he has no interest in sex, period. And then when Cabaret was made, the Isherwood character, who they now called Cliff instead of Chris, they concoct a romance between the main character, who's based on Isherwood, and Sally Bowles. The essential story is that Christopher Isherwood was spent many years in Berlin, in Germany, in the like 1930, 31, 32 period, a time when there was a lot of actual sexual freedom. He had many sexual experiences with men, and then he formed almost like a soulmate. He found like a soulmate in a woman named Sally Bowles, and she's played by Liza Minnelli in the movie. And she sings. She's like a cabaret singer and an aspiring actress, and definitely an eccentric, a bohemian, sexually liberated woman who's had dozens, like scores of sexual relationships with men. The stage play makes a big deal out of having the main character, the Isherwood character, have an affair with Sally Bowles. And it's certainly groundbreaking in many ways, because near the end of the play, she decides to have an abortion. So, it was a Broadway musical dealing with taboo subjects, but it was really not honest at all in terms of where Isherwood was coming from. And so when Fosse was hired as director, he was really given a free rein, and he decided that he was going to go back to the roots of the story. He was going back to Christopher Isherwood. And we have a whole new version of Cabaret. And, the sexuality of the main character is not only, it's not just subtextual. It's not just something we figure out from Michael York's performance. In the film, he has a sexual relationship with another man. Now, these days, people may think, well, why is LaFontaine making such a big deal about this? But I can assure you, in 72, and I went to see it when I was like freshman in high school, this was enormous. It was absolutely huge. And it's not that there weren't gay characters in movies, but they were usually like repulsive people, people. And it's like almost people put on screen to warn little boys and girls away from being a gay man or a lesbian. Movies, and maybe we don't agree on this, but movies like The Boys in the Band just horrified me. That movie like scares people, and the play scares people. Or the movies like The Children's Hour with the lesbians, one of them commits suicide at the end. It's like a terrible thing. Or Tennessee Williams, who I don't care how brilliant he is, the man was twisted. There's so many terrible things that happen to the gay and bisexual characters. In Cabaret, Michael York, who's the hero, who is presented as bisexual, is thoroughly sympathetic. He's a good guy. He's a sensitive person. He's kind. He has friends who are Jewish. He gives language lessons to two Jewish characters in a time when that really was risking that he would become a target of the Nazis. He tears down a Nazi flag at one point. So he's very much a heroic character, and I think very sensitively played by Michael York. And of course, we can't talk about Cabaret without talking about Liza. This was...
Hear that? That's now Crispy and McCrispy strips meeting creamy Caesar sauce. Sounds extra crispy. Caesar sauce at McDonald's, for a limited time. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Visible puts the ultimate wireless hack in the palm of your hand. With unlimited 5G wireless data and hotspot designed to keep you connected, powered by Verizon's 5G network. And no contract holding you back. Plans start at $25 a month, or get the premium Visible Plus Pro plan and save $10 on your first month when you use promo code HACK. Make the switch at Visible.com. Terms apply. See Visible.com for details.
Her Oscar-winning role, she's fabulous. And although she does, seduce the hero, and there is a brief period of like sort of heteronormative, whatever, she's also a very cool woman. She talks openly about homosexuality. And I think it's fair to say that a character like Sally Bowles is very appealing to queer people. Mm-hmm. She's liberated. She breaks all the rules. She finds happiness being true to herself. So especially as played by Liza, she's very much an iconic character. Mm-hmm. And much of the charismatic appeal of Cabaret is that her performance is so brilliant, so magnetic. Here's Michael York as Brian. A third important character is the character of Maximilian. He's a rich playboy who seduces both Sally and Cliff. And who can forget, there's this classic scene in Cabaret in which Fosse frames the three of them, having had quite a bit to drink, in this sort of splendid mansion, arms around each other. Here we have the ménage à trois as something that is acted on by all the characters. And Fosse just does a beautiful job visually of showing a man in love with a man in love with a woman, and a woman in love with two different men. And then he brings us close up to see, their lips touching each other. It's an intoxicating moment. It's really a great moment in the history of LGBTQ cinema. And, Cabaret is not an easy movie to watch because of the Nazis and, the brutality, and knowing that the Nazis ultimately drove people like Christopher Isherwood out of Berlin and destroyed the freedom, the sexual freedom, and they initiated a reign of terror. So it's a sobering movie to watch, but it really does hold up beautifully after all these years. It's really one of the greatest of all screen musicals. And its greatness is very much connected with same-sex love and bisexuality. I want to leave with one final thought that might be controversial, and that is the character of Brian has been written about as a bisexual hero. He's described that way in movie reviews. I think Fosse and Michael York, they've described him that way. My interpretation is different. The way I read the character, he's a gay man who has a brief fling with the woman. And then by the end of the movie, he realizes that his true nature is calling to him. So I would argue that it's even stronger than the portrayal of bisexuality, because it's showing that if a gay person is going to have any chance for happiness, he has to live an authentic life. So if Fosse were here, I'm sure he might disagree with me, but it's open to interpretation. And I just think I really like the way it shows the development of the main character. And by the end, he realizes he needs to be true to himself. And that's why the affair with Sally ends.
Yeah, I like how you connected both of these films, Camelot and Cabaret, with this menage a trois desire. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, David.
Well, we owe a lot to these, we owe a lot to these great people, these great actors like Redgrave, like Michael York, like Liza, and I'm a big fan of so many of the Hollywood people. You know, they are, in terms of sexuality, they've been trailblazers.
Oh, absolutely.
They
Well, I'm gonna turn now to continue this Liza Minnelli legacy, which is her mother, Judy Garland, and The Wizard of Oz, except I want to talk about The Wiz because I feel like when we were putting this together, I really wanted to focus also on queer Black theater and movie musicals. And specifically, The Wizard of Oz, which I know Christian's going to talk about Wicked, but The Wizard of Oz has provided such a queer legacy with, being a friend of Dorothy, people identifying themselves with the song Over the Rainbow, who are part of the LGBT community. And, some facts about The Wiz, which I think the film is one that I always enjoy rewatching. So it's adapted from the 1974 Broadway musical. The Wiz is from 1978, the movie musical, directed by Sidney Lumet. It reimagines The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum with a fully African American cast. Dorothy is a 24-year-old teacher from Harlem who's transported to this urban fantasy world of Oz. It was produced by Universal Pictures and Motown Productions. Filming took place in Astoria, Queens. The cast stars Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, Nipsey Russell, Ted Ross, Mabel King, Thelma Carpenter, Lena Horne, Richard Pryor. And the music is the adaptation of songs by Charlie Smalls and Luther Vandross. It was released in October 24, 1978, to commercial failure. But I think that the movie musical has definitely lived on, specifically in the character of Diana Ross's Dorothy. And even in just the way that the set, and I'll show some photos here, the way that, even with the cover art we have here of this like disco fueled soundtrack. And even I would argue Lena Horne has that very iconic legacy with like being in the Cotton Club, her movie musicals. And I love here how, the landscape of Manhattan. I think here you can see like they even try to feature the Coney Island roller coaster. So I don't know. I was always in love with it from the depiction of Manhattan as the background with Dorothy. And even like the way that the costumes are designed, I think provides like a very Studio 54 style. And then here we have the New York Public Library with these little taxis. But yeah, I think Lena Horne, when she sings the song as Glinda the Good Witch, Believe in Yourself, like the way that being authentic to yourself really ties to the queer journey of overcoming obstacles and trying to find your true authentic identity, even when people are questioning your journey. To me, like that's what makes not just The Wiz, but The Wizard of Oz such a queer tale. And like finding found family through, Dorothy's connection to the Tin Man, the Lion, the Scarecrow. So let me just see here. Okay. So The Wiz, like, I also think like it's very empowering because the musical version, the Broadway version, had Andre DeShields, who was playing The Wiz. And, he's been very open about his, gay identity. He describes himself as a Black man who is queer, or a Black man who loves other men, was diagnosed with HIV and has lived with it for over 40 years. So I think even just The Wiz and its legacy, like what it means to be a queer Black person, and find yourself in the musical, and overcome, especially during the AIDS era, like what that meant for those in the theater community. I know will nicely connect us to Dreamgirls, because Diana Ross, not only is in The Wiz as Dorothy, but Dreamgirls is all about uh, biographically connecting to the Supremes. And I think what I'm really interested in with The Wiz and Dreamgirls is how both of these texts really speak to that idea of the like queer iconic woman, that like gay icon like Cher, Diana Ross, so when we get into Dreamgirls, which is probably one of my favorite movie musicals. So Dreamgirls is adapted from the 1981 Broadway musical, all about the history of the Motown record and its superstar act, the Supremes, but then in the musical called The Dreams, not much really changed, even though Diana Ross notoriously has tried to distance herself from Dreamgirls, or that it's not, exactly a true story about how the Supremes rose up and how Diana Ross becomes separate from the Supremes as her own act. But there's a lot of similarities here. So Effie White is the lead singer, and the backup singers, Dina Jones, Laurel Robinson, in the movie musical, which comes out in 2006. Beyonce stars as Dina Jones, Aniki Noni Rose is Laurel, and Jennifer Hudson, wins the Oscar for her role as Effie White. Effie White is pushed out, I would argue, because she's pregnant with, we find out, Curtis, who is producing The Dreams, has a relationship with her, but then Curtis is also fooling around with Dina, which definitely causes this whole rift to occur. But years pass as the Dreams are becoming successful. In 1973, Effie becomes a single mother in Detroit. She's trying to have a comeback of sorts, or at least produce her own music. And this is where, as Effie starts to produce her music, Curtis basically has Dina Jones and the Dreams sing the same version, One Night Only, that Effie has just come out with, and does a disco version with Dina that like skyrockets the Dreams to the top of the charts. So I just find that Dreamgirls is such an interesting, queer, iconic, I would say, performance, with just the way that the queer community has embraced pop stars, and specifically female pop stars. I really like, and I'll just show here, just the way that the trio of women, this soap opera of sorts, really plays into how Dina becomes like the queer iconic disco pop star. So I think just the similarities between her and Diana Ross is fascinating. And I really love Diana Ross, her song I'm Coming Out, which, you know, is all about the queer community living a life of openness, which Diana Ross says she didn't know was a queer anthem, but her production team definitely knew it when they created the song for her, because the person who created it said that he was in gay nightclubs and like had this idea to have the lyric "I'm coming out," and how much that would play to Diana Ross's audience base. So yeah, I think just, you know, both of these films just really show the legacy of the queer community surrounding, like, wanting an appetite for characters who have to overcome obstacles and chart their own identity. So that's how I would link The Wiz and Dreamgirls. Okay, so Christian, I know you're going to take us into the Phantom of the Opera, unless you want to do Wicked first. It's up to you.
No, I can do Phantom since we're going chronologically in order. Yeah, so the Phantom of the Opera, that's coming off of the 1980, what was it, 86 musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber of the same name. The 2004, going back, my theme for these two, connecting these two, would be the theme of othered queer characters, which I believe is very prevalent and relevant in these times and ages. But to go back to the little synopsis I was about to give, I just wanted to preface that. So Phantom of the Opera, it stars Emmy Rossum, Gerald Butler, and Patrick Wilson. It discusses the love triangle relationship between the Phantom and Christine Dye, who is an up-and-coming performer in the opera house, in the Paris Opera House in the late 1800s, comes to terms with her stardom due to her being tutored by this angel of music who we later will know as the Phantom. And she then reconnects with an old flame of hers, Raoul, played by Patrick Wilson. And once the Phantom learns about this love that Christine has for Raoul, it becomes a big production. And I was actually rewatching it last night, and I was just taken aback by how a lot of people trash this film, and I understand it. I know that Joel Schumacher really might not have been the best person, but I still love it. I still appreciate it for what it is, and I love the Gothic imagery. I love all of the costumes. I love the fact that Andrew cast Gerard not because of his singing ability, but because of how Gerard was able to portray him as a sort of tortured soul, a tortured artist, I may say. As with the whole rock and roll biddy, where I was watching it, I said, oh, this kind of reminds me a little bit of Elvis Presley, or even Lestat, if you have seen the new Vampire Lestat TV show. And I just love how Gerard was able to portray him as that sort of tortured soul, which I think the Phantom is in a way, and how I think the queer community is sort of portrayed in some ways as some sort of monstrous type of that we have to hide behind a mask, which I think is very prevalent and relevant in these times. I'm just going to show a couple of photos here that I have.
Experience a membership that backs what you're building with American Express Business Platinum. Get 2 times membership rewards points per dollar on eligible purchases in key business categories, as well as on each eligible purchase of $5,000 or more, on up to $2 million in eligible purchases per calendar year. American Express Business Platinum. There's nothing like it. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum.
This episode is brought to you by Tidy Cats, here to level up your litter game with their new Performance Plus lineup. Your home is your happy place, your cats VIPs. So when it comes to the litter box, excellence isn't optional. Choose from products that specialize in max power clumping, low tracking, or odor fighting so advanced, stink won't see it coming. Tidy Cats Performance Plus. Mission mighty, keep it tidy. Shop now at tidycats.com.
And again, I'm just in love with the Gothic imagery that is portrayed within the film. And whoops, not that one. I just love, whoops, I'm going over. I'm just loving of the costumes and of all the different intricacies that all of that each costume has towards each character. And then I'm just, again, I love all the, again, I said again, the Gothic imagery as well. And that actually segues into Wicked with going into the theme of othered. If you don't know Wicked, it's a very it's based on the 1995 novel by Gregor Maguire, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, whereas we understand the role of the Wicked Witch through her eyes, and we see all of those different increments of the Wizard of Oz, but through a different lens, which I really appreciated. Um, and so you get the relationship between Elphaba and Glinda, which you don't really understand in the 1939 version of The Wizard of Oz, but Gregor Maguire does this a really amazing thing of clicking these two characters who you wouldn't really think would go along, but they really do. They blend together and they're able to show themselves and be their authentic selves within each other. And I think that really is what makes the film the best that it can be. Both of those films, actually. And I just appreciate how both of these films, both Phantom and Wicked, are able to tap into being centered toward having to deal with the having them feel as if they're the problem in their own lives when they really aren't. They're just dealt these really bad cards in their lives, and they have to make the best of them as they can.
Mm, Well, interesting too, Christian. Joel Schumacher reworked The Wiz's libretto for the movie
Yup.
musical with Quincy Jones.
Yes.
So he's had a long. He also did one of my favorite films, Batman and Robin.
Yes, that is a queer camp in itself.
Poison
That's one that
Ivy,
I love
Uma
to rewatch
Thurman.
every now and then, just for Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy. That's one that I've resonated with so much.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the set design of the Phantom of the Opera movie musical was so well done.
I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know where did they film the movie musical?
The film, I believe
Mm-hmm.
it was on a soundstage, if I'm mistaken. Let me see.
No, yeah, you're right. It was in England.
Yes, it was in
Mm,
England. Mhm.
okay. Okay. Yeah, well, and also, um, like, do you both know the history of Cheryl Lee Ralph in Dreamgirls, like with her queer advocacy?
No,
Oh, okay. No, just because like I feel she's talked a lot about it, but
but I know
Cheryl
she's a
Lee
very big
Ralph.
advocate for the
Yeah,
queer
yeah.
community, and that's why I love her so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Abbott Elementary fame now. But
Yes.
she was Dina Jones on Broadway
Yes.
and like talked about how when Dreamgirls was on Broadway, sadly they lost like half of the cast to AIDS.
My gosh.
And like she was an early advocate for AIDS foundations and like speaking
Yes.
about the queer community. And especially like she said as like being in Dreamgirls, but also like the stigma of being like someone who was black who had HIV, like that's double stigma of being openly gay and black. How like she thought it was so important to be an outspoken advocate. So, um, I mean, I know Diana Ross also has been very open about being an ally.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and I mean, well, David, Liza Minnelli is such an ally. Yeah. Did you see Liza's recent birthday, like clips from the concert that they did for her in, I think it was Carnegie Hall, right?
So was everybody there? It must have been like a stellar audience.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, I think, Broadway performers did tributes or like sang from her. Uh, what was the concert that she did with Bob Fosse? Was that Liza with a
Liza
Z?
with the Z,
Liza,
maybe?
but yep, Liza, the Z.
Yeah. I think, yeah, different Broadway performers did different songs from Liza with a Z.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think some of them are on YouTube. Um, but well, yeah, and then she has her memoir, Liza, that just came out. But yeah, like what are some things like, you know, we have here really interesting, very different movie musicals.
Very.
And I feel like we could do another show with more movie musicals because there's so many queer themes. Um, but like any thoughts on these different musicals that we've chosen?
Well, I think it's really wonderful how artists are inspired by artists who've gone before them.
Mm.
I think Broadway musicals deserve to be taken much more seriously than they
Oh,
usually are.
yes.
And I think, there's really a long and really wonderful history, and it's a history in which LGBTQ people are essential. And I think, that in itself is something to be proud of. But I also think that, there needs to be much more that's written and discussed about what it has meant that the stars, the directors, the producers, the writers, that, how did they take their experiences and create, these works of art that have been enjoyed by the mainstream.
Yeah.
And it's not something that mainstream people always want to hear about.
No.
But that's really rather dishonest of them, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Because, my feeling is, look, if you're going to go to Broadway, if you're going to enjoy the Broadway musicals or the film musicals, then you have to be supportive of LGBTQ history and identity, because as Liz Taylor once said, you take the gay people out of Hollywood and you don't have Hollywood. That's I'm paraphrasing one of her quotes, but she was making an excellent point. She was outraged. She said, look, you don't have Hollywood if you take out, all of the people, or tell them that they have to go in the closet or they can't be themselves. So there's a certain amount of hypocrisy. And I think what's exciting about the 21st century is we have the chance to break through that, not only in what happens now, but in terms of how we study the history.
Yeah.
Which is, what we're doing tonight. And I think it's very exciting.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, David, that you chose two musicals that kind of show the like the queer themes are almost about like things breaking apart. Right? Or like I just remember with Camelot how like they would what did they say about JFK, right? Wasn't there something about his presidency being like Camelot?
Yes, well, this was his favorite musical.
Mm-hmm. And that like
But
unfortunately
he was sexually unconventional too.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was not someone who, and I think people ultimately were very unfair to him when his, issues in his private life came out. But he didn't follow that, the image of the nuclear family. People had expectations of him and Jackie Kennedy that were not fair or honest or realistic. And I think part of the appeal of Camelot and Cabaret is that sexuality is something that should be talked about honestly, and that it's complex. It's not something that should be oversimplified. And that but it's also that, as you mentioned, Redgrave and people like Minnelli, that I think what they show us in their performances is that it's people have a right to act on their sexuality, as long as they're not hurting anybody, but especially when sexuality is about love, the love for Arthur's love for Lancelot, or Brian's love for Max, etc. That when sexuality, especially when it's connected with love, it's something that should be honored. And it's, it's great that people are singing about it, that there are love songs. That could be like a whole other program, is the great Broadway love songs that have, the LGBTQ meaning to them. And you mentioned that a little bit with, I guess, the song that Diana Ross sings. But so many of these great songs have this resonance, for people in our community. And I think that again, it's something to be celebrated, but it's also fascinating to study it. It's fascinating to see how artists use creativity to, make their points and to change society.
Yeah.
People,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
and especially when Vanessa Redgrave, which was my introduction, I think was Christian's, but fairy tale theater, when she plays the evil queen in the Shelley Duvall series, I just feel like she's always playing some really interesting, meaty, subversive characters. Like, she's so good at adding humanity to villains. Even though, right, I'm not saying Guinevere is a villain, but like complicated
Once upon a
characters.
time she is, but
Yeah, well, I mean, she does commit adultery
yes.
as Guinevere. But yeah, like even when you think Guinevere
But
is going
when adultery is
Yeah.
being presented through these Broadway ballads that are, so brilliant and gorgeous, it's like suddenly we realize, well, wait a minute, maybe the confines of a traditional marriage are not logical.
Yeah. Or when you think that she's going to be brought to her execution.
Exactly.
That's like a very disturbing, and there's a song around that too.
And exactly. And who unfortunately many queer people have that fear that the mob is going to come after us.
Yeah.
So it's like it's the mob mentality, whether it's Cabaret or Camelot or so many screen musicals. It's like it's the mindless mob and their narrow-minded prejudices. That's really the source of destruction and evil.
Yeah.
Like not people falling in love with several different people, or falling in love with someone of the same gender, or dressing as the other gender, or this is not seen. This is seen as something that's just part of being a human being.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just like how even Guinevere gets tied to witchcraft in a way. Like I feel like Guinevere, Joan of Arc, they even Lady Macbeth, I feel like even though Guinevere I wouldn't say is that manipulative, she's not manipulative person like Lady Macbeth, but or vindictive. I do think they all of these
But in many
archetypes.
many versions of Arthurian legend, Guinevere is vilified. So I think that view of like a strong woman is somehow evil is something that Broadway has been great about, completely turning on its head.
Yeah.
That we have characters like Dolly Levi, or obviously Streisand and Funny Girl, and as both of you have pointed out, these characters have great appeal for LGBTQ people, even if the story is not overtly about our experiences. The characters, especially many of these iconic women, have they've just developed a tremendous following.
Yeah, yeah, like what Christian was saying about Phantom of the Opera, I think is fascinating. Like thinking about, what it is with the Phantom, like the duality, that kind of like maybe the Phantom like represents the closeted experience versus who Christina's supposed to marry, which is
If you really
Raoul.
look at it, Andrew and David, if you really look at it, the Phantom is basically made to hide throughout throughout his entire life from childhood. So what other life does he know other than living alone in a sewer that he's had to try to make his home, which he eventually does, as we see later on in the film. And once he meets Christine, he kind of meets his sort of equal in a way, who he's able to mentor and teach and try to bestow some sort of gift upon her, and try to help her reach her greatest potential.
So you think it's an underrated film?
Yes, yes, I do.
Yeah, I think it's a very good film.
I became obsessed with it once I first saw it. I actually saw the movie before I saw the musical. I saw them the same year. So I saw it once the movie came out. I said, "Watch, well, watch, Mom. We're going to see this film first, and then we're going to see the musical the next week." So
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you
There's
like sort
not
of like the psychological darkness of the fan.
exactly.
Yeah, and we're drawn into that, and
I was.
yeah,
As a kid, I became sort of obsessed. I still am, you know.
well, and the queerness of like being an opera diva has a long history too.
Oh,
Of like the gay men applauding for their favorite soprano. Um,
exactly.
yeah, like Carlotta, the opera diva. I feel like she absolutely would love the men fawning over her. Um, I think Carlotta is interesting too. Um, but is there a movie here that one of us has talked about that like you haven't seen, or it's something like now when you rewatch it, you feel like you're going to see it in a different lens?
I actually haven't seen Camelot. Funny enough. And I should. Um, but yeah, I'll definitely look at it, and see if I can point out the queerness between uh Arthur and Lancelot, which I'm very eager to find out. I've never actually had the
now
pleasure to
I'm,
watch
you
the
know,
film.
I love the score for Phantom of the Opera, and I've seen the stage play. I have not seen the film, so now I'm very interested because I've always liked Frankenstein and Dracula and all those characters, and I always saw those characters as like sort of speaking to me. Not that I'm at all like those characters. I'm not saying that I am, but you know, the person being pursued by the mindless mob. You know, the people with torches who come after the person who's different, you know, the Frankenstein monster,
Yeah.
etc. So, you know, I'm gonna watch. I have not seen the film Phantom of the Opera, but now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, yeah,
And I like what you said about the Gothic imagery. I think that's very interesting.
yeah. Well, it's interesting that like Wicked, well, the Phantom of the Opera, like you said, to me is kind of like Cabaret, where they kind of both have the tortured artists depiction. I mean, Cabaret is very I feel like the Phantom would enjoy the dinginess of the Cabaret. Um and even like Alphaba and Wicked, she has to like kind of lurk in the shadows. I don't know, that's like such an
Well, that
interesting
that that
theme.
concept of an underground world is
The underground.
fascinating because you know we hear underground world and we're taught to shun it.
Mm,
But you know, but there's a lot of creativity that you know people. There are people who live most of their lives in a so-called underground world. You know, people who are minorities who are not accepted in the mainstream create their own worlds. And so the Kit Kat Club in Cabaret is, you know, that's the refuge of people who are trying to, you know, some of them are trying to get away from the Nazis. Others are trying to get away from Christianity and organized religion. People have their various reasons for going into these kind of like dark and, you know, very unconventional environments.
yeah.
Obviously, the Phantom is not allowed to live in the daylight. But I think, you know, that Broadway at its best explores, you know, Broadway at its best and film musicals at their best are not just, you know, families singing together like the Von Trapp family in The Sound of Music. You know, I like The Sound of Music, but there's a lot there that I don't think is very honest or realistic. And
Mm,
there's not that much to explore in terms of like authentic portraits of human beings. But once you get away from those sort of family-friendly musicals, you're going to find that there's a lot that's very, very interesting
Mm,
in film musicals and Broadway musicals.
yeah. Well, and I even think like the Wiz and Dreamgirls, I think they eventually reach a point of like black excellence and joy. And I think that a lot right now are talking about queer joy. Like I just saw the Catch Jellicle Ball, and that's like very queer joy, embracing just representation that doesn't have to be narratives that are like suffering. And I kind of wonder, like, are we going to see more narratives? Like you brought up Heated Rivalry, David. I mean, that's an example of something that's joyful and optimistic. And like, are we going to have more narratives like that because of our social climate right now? Like, I think people are looking for joy, and maybe, like we can't handle as much oppression narratives. So I don't know. I feel like movie musicals speak well to that idea of a lot have musical numbers that are so escapist in a way, while also presenting obstacles, you know. Like I think Wicked does so well because it shows this female friendship and like the power of female friends and the authentic wicked witch and like countering that stereotype of the witch. Again, I think a lot of these also it's so interesting. So many of them actually have motifs of like witchcraft, right? Camelot, The Wiz, Wicked, Phantom, I guess. He's kind of magical, right? Like, is the Phantom a magical creature, Christian?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the supernatural.
David? The
I think he
supernatural.
dabbles in it. Like he does like some magician type of thing. Like he basically created the opera house. Not created, but he was able to manipulate and find his way with gadgets and stuff, trying to figure out how to uh create his own way of getting around the place so he knew where to go without being seen. So he was able to blend in the shadows.
Yeah. But I also love what you said about Christian, you had written to me about the rock and roll, like
Oh
because of
yeah.
Gerard Butler, that it kind of reminded you of Elvis and Lestat in the
Yeah.
Vampire
I've actually
Lestat.
been on a binge watch of the Vampire Lestat, and I couldn't help but see the similarities between the Vampire Lestat and the Phantom in itself, because they both have tortured pasts, and the only way that they're able to feel complete within themselves is through singing and through song, music. And that's how the Phantom is able to show his love of authentic music is through Christine. And Elvis was able to do it with his audience and his music. And the Phantom, I think, is in his own way, in his own right, um, sort of able to be a conglomeration of all these different tortured artists that we see through rock and roll. And I think that's sort of why Andrew Lloyd Webber picked Gerard Butler to play the Phantom, because he didn't want a classically trained opera singer, which is what kind of how he landed Michael Crawford. But he was a Broadway performer, and he was in Hello Dolly as well, the film version. And I think that sort of innocence sort of drew um, Michael to the role of the Phantom. But for Gerard, we're talking about the movie, but for Gerard, he was able to tap into, because actually, I don't know if you guys knew this, but Gerard was in a band during the same time that they were doing the Phantom of the Opera, a rock band of all things. So he was able to work his voice through what Andrew wanted him to do, which is he didn't want him to do these long librettos, these long chords of music, he wanted him to be raw and real and authentic, because that's what the Phantom is at the end of the day. He has to be this tortured soul who has to go through these trials of his life where he wasn't accepted. He wasn't seen as um the belle of the ball. He basically had to maneuver his way through life as a shadow. And I think that's what drew Gerard to the role, and also because I think he started the whole trope of the bad boy image, where girls always fall in love with like the bad boy, and Gerard sort of had that sort of suave, sophisticated type of look as we see through like the half Phantom Mask, where we see, his other side is very handsome and very seductive. And that's what I think appeals to young girls and queer men to the Phantom, because they're able to identify with having to hide half of themselves or a full self, which I think really rings true in the queer community, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I agree totally, Christian, and I don't want to in any way sort of not support what you've been saying, Andrew, about queer joy, but I feel that if one of the major contributions that LGBTQ people and themes have made to musicals is that we've brought the shadows, we've brought the reality, we've brought some grit. We've taken the just sort of superficial chorus lines and sunniness and the trite plots, and we've brought some darkness, because that's a part of, it's a part of what makes us human. So I don't think we should suppress that or be afraid of it. I also agree with what you're saying, Christian, that music, by giving expression to a whole range of human emotions and human experiences, that's something that's beautiful. It's the expression through song, through music, we see this with Sally Bowles in Cabaret, that, in these.
Yep, and maybe this time she was able to.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, and I would also say just like how queer joy can be, how you can find joy in such dark times, right? Is like more what each of these narratives articulate is, how do you find joy in just turmoil or when things get really rocky?
I mean,
is a
look at
queer
Wicked.
experience.
Look at Wicked. You have Elphaba being put on this pedestal by Madame Marble to really prove herself to the wizard, and then once she meets him, she finds out that he's this con man who basically doesn't want what's good for Oz. He basically he wants everyone to be conglomerate and made to be silenced. And when Elphaba learns about this, she fights back, and she's able to tap into that hidden power, or that power that she's always found scary, and she's always unsure because she doesn't know if it's either going to be used for good or used for bad. And she's always tried to find that medium between understanding what is good and what is bad in her mind's eye. And I think that's what really makes it an even more elevated musical, because in The Wizard of Oz, we only know the Wicked Witch as being evil and only obsessed with ruby red shoes, and in Wicked, we get this backstory where we understand her motives as to why she cares so much about her sister, the Wicked Witch of the East, aka Nessa Rose. And she also develops this unusual or unseemly bond with Glinda. And I appreciate that we're able to peel back Elphaba's character layers, and we're able to see her for who she really is. And that Ozda's ballroom scene really does it for me. Every time I watch it, I always get a little misty-eyed, because I'm always brought back to those times in high school and middle school where I was just ruthlessly bullied, and I was just able to rise from the ashes, so to speak. And I loved how Elphaba was able to do that with her own character growth, as well as Glinda herself, but she was always given the silver spoon. So
Yeah, that's why I feel like in Dreamgirls, the song "I Am Changing,"
yes.
that I
Was
mean,
that
well,
made specifically for the film?
no, that was
That
in
was
the
also in
musical.
the show as well? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but I feel like, um, "I Am Changing," and of course, why am I forgetting the end of Act One? Um,
And I'm telling you,
and I'm telling you, yes, is definitely
those are queer
like
anthems in
those
themselves.
are anthems that
Mhm.
speak to the queer community. I'm definitely though a sucker for the disco songs too.
Who is it?
But well, even it's interesting, you bring up about in Wicked Christian,
Mhm.
the idea of the wizard or just things aren't as they seem.
Yeah.
Like
When
who's
she
trying to
peeled back that
manipulate.
curtain.
And in The Wiz, it's actually like a washed up politician from Atlantic
Yeah.
City. Is The Wiz. So just the way that those who seem like they're in power,
Really
you have to
aren't.
question authority, right? And I mean
Yeah.
in Cabaret, there's
Oof.
just such dark Nazism
Yeah.
that's creeping in, and how Sally's just trying to even live this delusional life that she's a star. Which I think in the Broadway version is probably even more, it's more gritty than Liza Minnelli, just because Liza is, a fabulous performer. But I didn't know this, David, that Julie Andrews was going to be Sally Bowles
What?
in the Broadway or version.
And she was advised against taking the role.
Yeah, by her manager, who said it was too, I think, immoral. That would have been interesting.
Wouldn't it?
I mean, that would have definitely countered Julie Andrews.
Well, I think a classic musical that did star Julie Andrews and that was very unconventional is Victor Victoria.
Oh yeah.
And it's, and that was a gutsy move on her part to make that film, 1982.
Yeah.
And Robert Preston, let's face it, we always thought that he was gay, but now as a man in his 50s or whatever, he came out on screen and off screen. That was really gutsy of him. And I really liked the character of Victoria, who pretends to be a female impersonator.
Yeah.
And does, Julie Andrews does it beautifully, because when she sings as a woman on stage, she's a woman pretending to be a man who's then singing as it's very Shakespearean. It's very much like Shakespeare, where women pretend to be men and then they pretend, and then those men,
Twelfth Night.
Like Twelfth Night. It's all this sort of gender fluidity. And I think Victor Victoria may not be totally politically correct, but for the time it was really very groundbreaking.
Yeah. Well, and Leslie Ann
I just talked
Warren.
about it on my podcast last week.
Oh,
So-
yeah, we have to listen to that.
Yeah, we'll have
to
to
listen to Christian's discussion, everyone watching.
Oh, I will definitely look for that.
But yeah, maybe in a few months we should all, or in a month, come back and do one film and we'll dive deep into it, because I feel you've kind of opened the door to Julie Andrews, David. Maybe we have to do Victor Victoria or one of the
Poppins.
other. Oh yeah, Mary Poppins.
Oh, I liked what Christian. I watched one of your short videos on your YouTube channel, and it just never occurred to me to think of Mary Poppins in the way that you describe her, but it makes perfect sense that she's subversive. She subverts the patriarchy, the Edwardian era, and she's really very empowering to those children, because we don't know what's, especially Michael. I really like to think that Michael is not going to grow up like his father. He's not going to be like these boring, stuffy men in the business suits. We don't know what's going to happen with Michael. He could be gay, he could be transgender, he could be all kinds of things. And Mary Poppins is like giving him permission
to be his
to
authentic
be
self
himself.
and to not be afraid.
And what a great message to communicate to small children. That's really, that's very groundbreaking. These are
Affirming.
very small children in Mary.
Yeah.
They're like 6 and 7 years old. And, I just think that would be kind of a fun one to talk about too.
Yes.
I'm always down to talk about Mary Poppins. So if you want me to talk about it, I'm more than happy to bring that up for discussion.
But you have to perform some magic during the discussion.
Ah!
I love it. Well,
I'll try to come up with some tricks.
Yes.
Please
Well, I
do.
love this idea. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, so, David, where can everyone find, your documentary on YouTube?
Well, it's not just West Side Story. We're releasing a new documentary on Oscar Wilde, and we're almost finished with one on Virginia Woolf. So we're planning to do like a whole series of LGBTQ authors. And so all the people need to do is go look for LGBTQ classic literature on YouTube.
Okay.
Good. Okay, make sure you follow, like, all of the things. And then, Christian, where can everyone find your podcast?
Well, you can find me on that OK Classic Cinema. You could find me on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and surprisingly, iHeartRadio. I put that on as a whim, and they accepted it, so it's been there since I started the whole thing back in 2022. And yeah, so you can find me on there. My personal Instagram is Learning Richard Chris. I have a book fetish, so I express my love of books, and I just recommend different. I'm now working through the Heartstopper series, so I'm before the movie comes out. Actually, next week I think it comes out.
Oh, okay.
So I've been trying to read through that and trying to find my career joy in reading more queer related books, and also rewatching Heated Rivalry as well.
Well, yeah, and if I know it's not streaming yet, but I got to see this film. If you both are horror or enjoy horror, Leviticus was so interesting. And it's horror, but it's also a romance coming of age.
I've heard that movie was so good. I'll definitely look
really,
that up
really
if it ever comes to streaming services.
Yeah, I'm sure. Probably soon.
Hopefully.
And then Ivory Tower Boiler Room, wherever you get podcasts, YouTube channel. So excited to have you both. And we got hearts from David. Okay. Have a wonderful night, and we'll have to do this again.
Yes.
Okay. Bye, you two.
Bye.
Bye.